Hi, I'm Duncan MacLeod of Blackheath Products, and later in this video we're going to be going to our workshop to show you how to install a work surface material called Spectra Slim Edge. Spectra Slim Edge is a durable, hygienic, waterproof and easy to clean work surface, perfect for use in kitchens, utility rooms and bathrooms. There are 18 decals to choose from. One of the big advantages of Spectra Slim Edge is that you don't have to create templated dimensions for factory production, because Spectra Slim components can be machined on site using standard woodworking tools, which will save you a huge amount of cost and time. You can install undermount as well as inset sinks, and as an option, drainer grooves can be routed into the surface. Corners can be shaped easily without the need to resurface the edge, thanks to the solid through colour core of Spectra Slim Edge. So let's go right now to our workshop to see a complete guide to the installation techniques for Spectra Slim Edge.
When cutting Spectra Slim Edge to length, it should be fully supported on the underside of it, so a scrap piece of material left on the underside. This helps with any breakouts. When you're cutting it to length, ideally use a guide rail with a plunge saw, plunging 3 to 4 mil at a time until we get through the thickness of the surface. In doing this, you should be using a fine tooth triple cut TCT blade. We always recommend that you leave it about 2 mil longer than it should be, so it can be trimmed with a router to give a really good finish to it. So where we've trimmed it to length using the plunge saw, you can see the serrations coming into the top of it and the circular saw machining marks. So by putting a straight edge onto the end of it, setting it that 2 mil in, so we end up with the finished cut, we're now just going to use a router cutter just to trim it to length. That'll leave us with a much smoother finish. So the top section that we've got here, this is the one that's been done with the circular saw, which, as you can see the tool marking that's still in it. The bottom one's now being trimmed with the router, which gives us a much cleaner, more polished finish to it. So with Spectra Slim Edge, it's quite easy to shape. So in this instance, all we want to do is to put a small radius onto the corner of it, which would perhaps be following a pilaster on the underside on your furniture. So all we're doing in this instance, we've simply put an MDF template coming onto the corner. We've set this up now so we can use a router cutter with a top bearing on it that will simply follow the template round, leaving us with this radius. If you wanted to put a bigger radius on, perhaps that was following a corner base unit, something of that nature, then I would suggest that first of all you remove some of the excess material with either a plunge saw or a jigsaw. If you're using a jigsaw, use it with a metal cutting blade. So it's a fine tooth metal cutting blade with a jigsaw, and then just trim it with the router. So in many instances with Spectra Slim Edge, some people will want an inset sink dropping into the surface. Problem with that is most inset sinks are set for 30 or 40 mil thickness of work surfaces, and therefore the clamps don't work. So what we're doing here, just as a demonstration piece, is we're going to drill the corners as though it's for a hob or an inset sink. So we're going to use a 12 mil drill just to go through there, then we'll be joining this up with a plunge saw, jigsaw, however you choose to do that. If it's a jigsaw, then we need to use a fine tooth metal cutting jigsaw blade, which that will go through it quite easily. On the underside of it, whether it be for the inset sink or indeed for the hob, wherever the clips are to be situated, we'll need to thicken it up, because of inset sinks and hobs are generally for 30 or 40 mil work surfaces. So where the clips will be positioned on the underside of it, we'll take 2 offcuts of the material, and using hot melt glue we'll simply adhere that to the underside of it where the sink or the hob clips are going to be situated. So just for the 12mm corner, whilst you're drilling that, the surface itself should be fully supported on a scrap piece of material. So here we've got a piece of MDF underneath it, so again it's not going to do any harm, there's no breakout coming through. So if you're using the jigsaw with it, then it's just a fine tooth metal cutting blade. I've taken part of this through, so I'm just going to finish the corners off now. I used a plunge saw across this end of it, so I'll just trim this out now with the jigsaw. The jigsaw should be set so there's no wobble on the blade, it should be straight cutting, and just let the jigsaw do the work. It is a tough material, so let the saw do the cutting, don't push it through. So the sections that we've done here, just to show the hob cutout. In the corner here, we've got the 12mm drill hole going through. That gives us a radius corner, which helps to take any stress out of the material. All corners should be radiused. We then, just with sandpaper, just broke slightly the top edge just to deburr it, and then added the aluminium foil, which goes all the way around the hob. That's to protect the surface from heat. That is required whether it be a gas, electric, induction, doesn't matter what type of hob that's going in, it needs that added aluminium tape. For an inset sink, we finished the cutout again there, and where the sink clips or the hob clips would be going, all you'd need to do there is simply thicken it up to get to that 30 to 40 mil that hob or sink clips would suit. So in doing that, we've just used hot melt glue and simply built that up with 2 12mm sections, so we're up to 36mm now, which is ideal for an inset sink or an undermount, or a hob. Spectra Slim Edge is ideal for use with undermount sinks because it's totally waterproof. So if you're going to do an undermount, then you need to order, along with your materials, the Slim Edge installation kit 1. Within that kit you'll find that you've got sufficient colour matched adhesive to do 2 joints. The biscuits and the bolts are supplied to do 2 joints as well, and then for the undermount sink itself there's a drill supplied which has got a depth stop on it because we're only working with 10mm. So we need to drill deep enough to get the brass insert into the work surface. Then we've got the bolt that tightens the sink to the underside of that work surface as well. It also gives you the various grades of sandpaper and Scotch-Brite that's required to polish the inside of the cutout that we're going to do for an undermount sink. The undermount sink that we're going to use in this instance is part of the river collection. The beauty of that, all undermount sinks within the river collection have got jigs available for them. So in this instance what we've done is we've clamped the jig into place, and then there's a couple of methods that we can use to work with this. We're going to use a router to follow that round using a guide bush on the underside of it, and that'll offset then by about 10mm where we're going to show the stainless steel. If you wanted to, you could simply drill a hole into the top surface and take out that section, the excess material, using a jigsaw. If you're doing that, you need to use a fine tooth metal cutting jigsaw blade. Take your time with it. It is a tough material to go through. Make sure it's fully supported whilst you're doing this, because the weight of that excess material is, well, it's quite heavy, and as you get towards the end of it, there's a chance that it would actually snap. So just keep it well supported, whether you're using it with a router, scrap piece underneath it, or you're using a jigsaw. Make sure that the cutout's fully supported. If you were only going to use a standard inset sink, then you would need installation kit 1, if that was, sorry, installation kit 2, if that was just doing one joint. Or if you were doing an undermount and you wanted 3 or 4 joints coming in, order installation kit 1 with then a couple of installation kit 2s. The kit 2 is suitable for one joint at a time and has everything that you need to complete that one joint. So with the jig set in place for the undermount sink, we've set the router up using the guide bush. Got this set now, so we would be plunging 3 to 4 mil at a time, taking it through the depth of the work surface in 3 to 4 passes. On the underside of it, we've got a piece of scrap material, piece of MDF on the underside, so we can route, so we just go through the surface, and that will stop any breakout from the underside of the work surface. So with that in place, so we've now been round with the router, we've done 3 passes to get us through the thickness of the material. That's just cut into the MDF below, which is ideal for what we need. So that now leaves the MDF's, the section in the centre, free to simply be removed. With the cutout then, it simply needs sanding just to complete the inside of that cutout before we can fix the stainless steel to the underside of it. So having completed the sanding around the inside of the cutout, we've now repositioned the sink on the underside of the worktop, marked where that's going, and then it's simply a matter of drilling the holes for the brass inserts to go into. With this, it's an 8.5mm diameter hole. The drill's supplied with the installation kit, and it's got a stop built onto it. When that's delivered to you, it's not set at any particular depth. It needs to be adjusted to get it somewhere between 9 and 10mm that we're going into the surface. Bearing in mind you've got a 12mm thick surface, so there isn't a lot of room for tolerance. So test that on a scrap piece, the inside, the cutout of the sink, just to make sure that that's in the right position. And it's then simply a matter of drilling the holes. Dependent on the size of the sink, you've got 10 brass inserts and bolts that can be used with it. So it's only a matter of working out the right location for them. In this particular one, we're putting 3 down each side and 2 across the top and the bottom. Drilling it very straightforward. And the stop doesn't allow us to go through any further. And then once we've done that, we'll simply remove the tape that we marked it out on and push the inserts into it, which they simply push in, and as they go down then, and you tighten the bolt, it opens up like a rug plug. So on the underside of it, once we'd completed drilling the holes around the outside, then all we needed to do was to drop the inserts into each of the holes, and those are simply tapped into place. So with the undermounted sink, we repositioned the sink. We'd already put the brass inserts into it, so we've repositioned the sink. When you put the silicone on the underside of this before it is bonded to the work surface, it starts to slide around. So to prevent that, we're simply using some blocks of MDF with some hot melt glue. Put those blocks up against the edge of the sink on 4 sides. That will prevent it moving. Then as we tighten the bolts, then it'll stop it moving across whilst the silicone's being squashed to complete the adhesion to the underside of the work surface. That will allow us then to complete the bolts as we tighten those up. So we've fastened in the majority of the bolts now. The MDF, as we'd said, that being glued to the underside of the work surface prevents the sink from moving. With the bolts themselves, there's a nut that goes onto it first of all, so we fasten that one on, and then we've added a washer to it because the washer allows us then more flexibility in the position of the sink. So that simply goes on and tightens. That's biting then onto the edge of the sink and prevents any movement in it. The blocks of MDF have now done their job, so they can be simply removed. And that's it, ready then to be turned over and complete the installation. So last thing before the plumber completes his work, we just need to position the tap, which for a single bowl, several positions to be discussed with the customer. We've decided to go in the centre here. It could be offset, it could be coming over in this area. For a bowl and a half, typically it would always arrive in this sort of area, but we're going in the centre here. You're just using a hole drill of the right size to suit whatever tap it is that you're using. Then you simply drill in. Let the saw do the work with this. As you get part way through, then drill from the other side as well, so we don't get any breakout coming onto the underside of it. Undermount sinks, quite often you'll need to put drainer grooves into the surface. On this one we're using a trend jig. The trend jig's got a fall already built into it, so it's progressing. Don't go in any more than 6mm at the deepest point, which is on the front edge where it joins the bowl. Up to you as to how many drainer grooves to put into it, dependent on the width of the sink. Most common is 5. On this particular one we're putting 6 into it. So with all of the grooves routed, we can just remove the drainer jig, and that leaves us with 7 cuts in this instance, all routed. Just need finishing off, which is simply done by sanding, which will blend that in as we do the inside of the sink cutout as well. So once we've done the drainer grooves with the router, the sink cutout's been done with the router, it simply comes down to sanding to finish. So using 180 grit that's supplied within the installation kit, then roll it up. The cutter that we used was a 19mm round bottom cutter. The reason for that is by the time you roll your sandpaper up and you're using finger size, then you can get into it quite easily. So with the sandpaper roll using 180 grit, first of all, you simply sand that to remove the machining marks that are in it, of which it sounds reasonably easy. So doing it as that with 180 first of all, you then continue on, once you've removed those marks, to 240 grit. Again, that's supplied within the installation kit. Once you've gone to 240, you can see on these this has been done at 240 and it takes it through to a much shinier black. You then finish it with the Scotch-Brite pad, taking it through again, being careful not to round the top edge of these drainer grooves too much. Slightly broken is fine, but don't make a big radius out of them. If you put a big radius onto it, it tends to go white, showing the laminate itself. On the inside of the sink cutout, again, using the 180 grit that's supplied, simply sand that to remove the tooling marks again on that. And as you do that one, you see the tooling marks disappear, then go over it again with 240, then finish it with the Scotch-Brite, but round the top edge, simply roll the sandpaper slightly, just over that top edge, simply to break the edge, not to put a big radius onto it, just to take the sharpness off it that was left with the router cutter, and that would then complete it. Okay, so with Spectra Slim Edge, we don't need to do a button scribe joint. It's a 12mm thick product with a square edge detail that comes to it. So in preparation to do the joint, we've trimmed the front edge with a straight router cutter, we've trimmed the adjoining piece with a router cutter and checked it to make sure that we've got a good joint coming into this. If we weren't happy with that when it's dry, then we'd be recutting it. If it was that the walls were slightly out on angles, then we'd recut the joint until we were happy with it. On the underside of it, in preparation for this, we're using Worktop jig. We've cut 3 bolt holes. The bolts that we use are specialised for the 12mm work surface. So slimline bolt, which we route into the surface 10mm, so we're just 2mm shy coming through, and that puts the position of the bolt in the centre of the worktop, so it'll pull together very neatly and easily. The Allen key that's needed for the end, that's supplied within the installation kit. You're also supplied with 3 biscuits for each joint. So those, we've cut the biscuits into that top surface, into the edge there, and again those level down from both top surfaces, which allows us then to reposition that very easily and not having to worry about the top surface being level. So we don't need to run our fingers through it. With those biscuits in, guiding it into being a level surface, that'll hold it in position whilst we tighten the bolts up. In between time and before we can fix that joint, we need to just secure the undermounted sink to the underside of the work surface. So the joint's been fully prepared. We've got the bolts cut on the underside of it, the biscuit slots are cut to help with the levelling of it. It now only remains for us to actually bring this joint together. So just to ensure it's completely clean, so we have no problems with the adhesive, then just a little bit of denatured alcohol just to clean off those edges. Make sure there's no pencil marks, no contamination left in it. That just takes a few seconds just to dry off. And then once that's done, we can then apply the bead of adhesive. To colour match the adhesive, which is supplied with the installation kit, the guide on it simply sits on the top edge of it here, so we know we're getting the adhesive into the right part of the joint. So that's simply applied, leaving us with a bead of adhesive that we can see goes all the way along the joint. If there's any patches missing, once we've run along it, we'll simply go over it again just to make sure it's completely covered. The adhesive itself gives us enough adhesive in the tube to do a 900 wide work surface. So once that bead's in place, just above where the bolts are, just a touch over there just to make sure that that's covered, because the adhesive in the main is landing in the centre of the 12mm surface. Once that's done, that can simply be removed, get rid of the applicator, and then a little bit of adhesive going onto the biscuits, and we slide the biscuit into place. 3 of those going in. These should be used as far as possible because this gives us the levelling of the surface without us having to run your fingers across it or run a sharp chisel across it to try and get the level of it. So once that's in, a little bit of adhesive then again on that edge of the biscuit as it's going into the other side of it. Again, it will just help with the full adhesion coming into there. So that then we simply slide into place, level it up, and we should get a nice bead of adhesive coming across the top there. If it is that, as with this one, you see any parts that don't look as though they've quite got it, then now's your opportunity because you've got about 15 minutes to work with this, just to get in that little bit of extra adhesive, just to ensure that we're fully covered across that top edge. Now, if the weather's warm, if the room's warm, the adhesive naturally starts to run down the joint. So it's not unusual to have to put that extra little bit across the top of it. That done, pop it back into place. Tighten it back up there, and then that's simply then close together, ready for the bolts to be installed. So the bolts, special ones for the Slim Edge work surface. So these are then fitted to the underside and tightened with the Allen key that's supplied. So as you can see, we've got a bead of adhesive that's come all the way out along the top of the joint. With this, it's not like solid surface, it needs to be removed straight away. So here, all we're doing is just running a chisel across the top of it. That will simply remove the excess glue very quickly. Then with the solvent that's supplied with the installation kit, solvent cleaner, some of that onto a clean cloth, and then we're just wiping that across the top of the joint, always going 90 degrees across the joint rather than down the length of it. If you were to bring it this way, if there was any slight gap in the joint itself, not that there should be, but if there was any slight gap, there's a good chance that you could be pulling the adhesive out of the joint and make it a weaker joint. So that gives us the joint completed there. Don't forget on the internal corner to remove the adhesive from there, and just on the underside of it as well before it goes up to what would normally be the front edge of the cabinet. So the last thing that we need to complete, just with a little bottle of linseed oil that's supplied, a little bit of that onto the cloth, and we just rub that across that front edge, done around the inside of the sink cutout. So that just leaves us with a really nice shine coming onto that edge detail. Continue that along this edge here. If you get a little bit onto the top surface, don't worry about it. Just before it dries, just polish it straight back off again. Not a problem at all. And on the draining board, in the drainer grooves, again, linseed oil, just put into those, and you can see it goes straight away from that greyish finish from where it's been sanded to nice black detail. So really opening up the core board to that. on the top surface of it, polish that over, and that's it done. Slim edge. As it is there, it's just put it up against a wall and perhaps suitable for tiling, something of that nature, just dropping onto the top of it. What most of our customers are doing now is to put an upstand, which is just 95mm, onto the back edge of the work surface, bonded to the wall just using silicone, and that prevents anything that's on the work surface being pushed into the wall and damaging the wall finish. So just a neat and simple way of finishing it. The alternative to upstand is to use a splashback. On this one we've used a 650 panel, which is actually a work surface. We've used this rather than using a laminate backed up with MDF, because the edges can be finished and polished in exactly the same way as the edge detail on the front edge there. So this can be fitted behind the hob area without any problem, with induction, with ceramic, no issues at all. If it is that you're using gas, then from the face of the splashback to the edge of the burner, we just need 140mm clearance on that, and then it's fine to be used with gas. If you're taking it up to an extractor, then we do a 950 wide panel, and you'd be using a 950 panel. Some customers are using the 900 wide panel, 950 wide, taking it from the work surface up to the ceiling and then mounting the extractor onto the top of it. So a lot of flexibility in the way in which this can be finished.